I had a student from my lesson website email me the other day, and he was really concerned because he's just starting out on his guitar journey. And he's like, I don't know how well I can progress because all I own is like a cheap guitar and a cheap practice amp. So I'm really concerned that I'm not going to be able to get too far. Do you think I should go buy some more expensive gear? And I've gotten this question quite a bit over the years, so I thought what I would do with this video is I would answer his question through it, but I would also address a few things, so if anybody else has this question in the future, they can reference this video and get my take on it. First of all, I started off on very cheap gear. So my first guitar was actually my brother's guitar. It was a Harmony electric guitar, and it was a Les Paul copy. It was just kind of the shape of a Les Paul, but it was really flat and very inexpensive. And for some reason, it had this gigantic PV bumper sticker on it. I still keep an eye out for it once in a while, and I keep thinking it's out there somewhere, and if I find it, I'm definitely going to buy it again. The amp was this gigantic PV PA amp, and it had like 4 channels in it, and they were all clean channels because it was a PA system. There was no distortion, anything like that, no effects except a reverb, I believe. And then this giant cabinet that was like this big, and I think it was 4x12s. It could have been 4x10s, I'm not sure. But like I said, there was no distortion because I really wanted to play Metallica and Megadeth and all that. It could not make that sound. So I got so desperate, I actually cut the speakers, old school style, with a knife, hoping I could get some distortion, and it worked a little bit. It just sounded a little bit more ratty. After months and months of having that set up, I got kind of tired of not having distortion, so I saved up and I actually was able to buy a heavy metal pedal by Boss. And that was a huge day for me when I finally was able to plug that thing in and get real distortion. So I had that set up for a long time, and I realized that the most improvement I ever had in my entire guitar career was in the first 3 years. So it's kind of strange that I got the best at guitar as far as incrementally through the worst gear. And I still have video of my old teenage metal band playing live shows at First Avenue and Mirage in Minneapolis, and I'm still using that gigantic PV well into my live playing career. So that kind of shows you how much I got out of an amp that wasn't even really a guitar amp. Now, when I started to teach guitar lessons way back in the day around 97, I had students that would come in, and we weren't in the ritziest part of the state by any means where I was teaching, and I would have students come in and their parents weren't that well off. And they would have cheaper gear a lot of the times, but I noticed that a lot of them had the same experience I did. They were just happy to have anything. So they would come in and they would have all their favorite bands on CDs, and they would be like, I want to learn this Offspring song, and can you teach me Green Day? And with the gear they had, they were still able to play it, and they were excited about it. So it felt like the level of appreciation for what the students did have was at a higher level at the time. And sure, I did have my slackers, but it was very few compared to the rest of them. So I would say I had about 5% slackers, and the rest of them were people that were genuinely interested in guitar and music, and they were really appreciative for anything they owned to learn that music. So I was pretty surprised when I moved to a more upscale city to do lessons. And the first thing I noticed was that students were coming in with really nice guitars. And they would sit down for the first lesson, and I'd just be like, wow, this student must be serious about guitar. I mean, they have a $1,000 Paul Reed Smith right there, you know? But what I quickly learned was a lot of these parents bought their kids expensive gear thinking that that would make them want to learn guitar more. And 90% of the time, it didn't work. So almost all the time, it was the situation where they already had such a nice guitar, they took it for granted. And they didn't get nearly as much joy as I saw the less affluent kids getting from their cheaper guitars. It's kind of like handing a 16-year-old a brand new sports car. It's like, okay, they didn't have to work their way up to that car, so how well are they going to take care of this thing, and how much are they going to appreciate it? One of the reasons I think it's a great idea to hold off on those high-end purchases when you're first starting out on guitar is you want to give yourself the ability to feel that you've earned your way and actually earn your way to that next level. If you jump from 0 to 10 right away, you might lose motivation. It might not seem like it. You might go, no, I still care about guitar, but maybe in the back of your head, you're not even aware of it. But you might lose that little bit of motivation to get to that next level. It'll also give you the chance to get the most out of what you already have. Now I keep pointing at this guitar. This is not a cheap guitar, but I'm gonna pretend it's my old Harmony guitar. When I played that guitar for that many hours, it almost became like this crazy connection. That's why I wanna buy it back if I ever find it again. But once you put all that energy into one instrument, you're suddenly bonded to that instrument for life. Even if it's just in your memory, it's a really great feeling to think back and go, God, I remember how many hours I put into that thing and how much I'm getting back now because of that one piece of wood. It's really strange how we can bond with a piece of wood with strings on it. So you'll lose out on that connection if you're jumping from guitar to guitar right away. So if you start off with cheaper gear, you'll be ready for anything in the future. It's kind of like when I first started to drive, my dad got me this Ford F-150 and it had this clutch that was impossible to push down. It took all my weight and all my strength, and it had the 3-on-the-tree shifter, so it was a stick shift. It was just a nightmare. But every car I've had after that has felt like a Tesla. If you get really good at playing a cheap guitar, no matter what you play in the future, let's say you go to a guitar jam, someone hands you a not so great guitar, you're still going to be able to make music on it. It's like if you would have handed a cheap guitar to Stevie Ray Vaughan, he would have made it sing no matter what. Speaking of Stevie Ray Vaughan, if you jump right to the expensive guitars that have great tone, you're going to steal away from yourself the ability to develop your own tone using just your hands. Some people say, it's not the guitar or the amp, it's the fingers. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like I said, if you hand Stevie Ray Vaughan a guitar, he's going to make it sound great. So if you have an inexpensive guitar and you're able to make it sound good, what you're actually doing is you're developing it through your technique because you're not relying on great gear to make it happen for you. And then when you do eventually get the great gear, it's just going to enhance what you can already do. And an obvious reason is that you'll save a ton of money because you're not going to be running out and trying to buy your way into being a good guitar player. That's a curse we all kind of fall into. I've fallen into it, when my YouTube channel took off and all of a sudden I was like, hey, I can afford all these guitars I really want. I started to overbuy guitars and I realized I just bought that guitar last week, but I'm not even playing it anymore. So I sort of took them for granted. Okay, now here's the big but part of the video. Once in a great while, I would have a student come in whose parents couldn't afford very much or they didn't take guitar lessons too seriously. And so they just sent their child into lessons with the crappiest guitar you could imagine. Sometimes it was a hand-me-down, like the grandma's like, okay, my ex-husband had this guitar, you could play it. Or maybe they just went to Walmart and bought like a cheap kid's toy guitar. And that's the problem. If the cheap guitar you have is unplayable and it hinders you too much, it's not a good idea. If you go with the affordable guitar, it at least has to be able to stay in tune for you, as well as have decent action and playability. So if you don't know what action is, it's the string height, how high the strings are from the fretboard. And if they're too high, it takes a lot of effort to fret the guitar, and all of a sudden, it makes life way harder than it has to be. Same with being out of tune all the time. Let's say you learn all your chord shapes perfect, but you always sound terrible. You're getting the wrong feedback from your efforts, and that's bad too. So you don't want your guitar to hinder you. Even if it's a cheap guitar, you can still set it up really well. You can bring it into a luthier, have them fix it up for you, and then as soon as you're able to keep it in tune and it's playable, you're set. If you have a cheap amp, you're in luck these days because there are virtual amps that you could just play through your computer. You could go buy effects pedals like I did when I first bought my heavy metal pedal. It was heaven for me. Nowadays, they've come down a lot in price. You'll find these mini pedals that are pretty affordable. Back in the day, I was paying like $50 to $100 for a pedal, and I think they've come way down since then. Sure, they still have the expensive ones out there, but you can get cheaper ones and still get great sound. Another exception, or but as you will, is sometimes having new gear and nice gear does inspire people. I know that happened to me, but that was after years of struggle, so I can't really tell you with certainty how I would have reacted if right away I was given like a really expensive guitar. One of my first nice guitars, sounds strange, but it was a Yamaha guitar, electric guitar, and it played so well, it didn't fight me at all. Like my Charavel always fought me, the trem system was kind of a nightmare, and my first guitar was pretty clunky. But this Yamaha was so slick, I felt like I barely had to try. And it did inspire me to practice a lot because there was no pain involved. Pushing down the strings was a breeze. It was like my dream guitar. It's another guitar I have to track down. But there is that case where sometimes having a really nice piece of gear or something that reminds you of maybe your favorite guitar player, like if you love Angus Young and you get an SG, it might inspire you to practice more because it's just more exciting to have the kind of guitar he had. Not to mention if you're a huge metalhead, and you have like a hollow body jazz type guitar, it might not be that inspiring. But let's say you get like a Schecter or something that's a little more geared towards shred guitar with a great trem system, whammy bar, locks, all that stuff. It could definitely inspire you to play more of the kind of music you love. So in those cases, it can definitely help. And sometimes you play a guitar for so long that you naturally level up on your own. And here's how. Let's say all of a sudden friends want to start jamming, they want to play a show, they want to start recording and writing music or whatever, and you realize that the gear that you've learned on all these years isn't going to cut it on stage. So that's when you're going to want to buy a second guitar, let's say, a bigger amp, some more effects so that you can play the songs you want to play. So that can definitely happen where you just play it so long you know it's time for the next level. And that's a good feeling as well. And finally, I'll talk a little bit more about not becoming a gear collector. Sometimes you find yourself going down that road, like I did. You start buying guitars that you always dreamed of having, but you're not exactly practicing as much as you used to. And sometimes that's okay. Some people just want to collect guitars, and that's totally fine. Just like some people find out that they actually have more fun working on guitars, fixing guitars, becoming guitar luthiers. That's great too. I've had students who eventually just wanted to make stomp boxes, guitar pedals. So it's kind of funny how you can start off wanting to play guitar, but as you progress, sometimes you become a great guitar player, you stick with it. Sometimes you branch off into other worlds. And so this video is not to shame anybody if they want to buy a bunch of great gear. What I wanted to do was simply give you my experience of what I've seen over the years. And since I went the direction of teaching and playing guitar for a living, I had to express to you guys that it didn't matter to me that I started on cheap gear. In fact, I think it helped enhance my love for guitar, because every time I went to that next level, I felt all of the gratitude and appreciation that I felt like I earned it. You know what I mean? It was such a great feeling. And so it kept me going. It was like a snowball effect. But not everyone's going to go down that road, and I totally understand it. I just wanted to give you my perspective. But hopefully you guys can share with me in the comments your experience about gear. Go ahead and leave the comments at the bottom, like I said, and I guess we'll catch you guys at the next lesson. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.